Rahu and Ketu are the nodes of the moon that have been accorded the status of planets in Vedic astrology. Despite not being physical planets, they seem to exert a lot of influence on all existence as per Vedic astrology. In my earlier episodes, I had talked about the important role of the placement of Rahu and Ketu in a natal chart and how their placement indicates the kind of lessons one has to learn in that particular birth. According to some schools in Vedic astrology, the placement of Rahu and Ketu is the most important placement in a natal chart, and the placement of other planets is just peripheral in supporting or manifesting the destiny of the native, which has already been foretold through the placement of Rahu and Ketu. Rahu vibes to number 4 in numerology. Number 4 is also the number of genius. Rahu, amongst other things, signifies science and technology. Rahu also signifies secrets and the dragon head, and gives wonderful masking abilities to the native in whose chart it is prominently placed. It is also an important planet for actors, politicians, who gain from their ability to master true intentions or identity. The prominence of Rahu in the current times can be seen from the dominance of science and technology in our daily lives. Also, as Rahu gives masking ability, it also indicates dual personalities. For instance, today most people have a dual personality, one the carbon personality, that is our physical body, and the other the silicon personality, our virtual entity, as can be manifested on social networks like Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, or Facebook. The focus of this episode will be on the role of Rahu as significator of science and technology, and the lessons that can be learned through Rahu. However, before we embark upon understanding the lessons that Rahu foretells, it would be pertinent to understand the genesis of Rahu as per Vedic traditions and its ruling deity Saraswati. I will be unfolding this episode in 4 parallel tracks which will converge into the important lessons that Rahu teaches. 2 of the tracks will be related to spirituality or mythology, whereas the subsequent 2 tracks will be related to science. This is completely in line with the theme, these 9 episodes that I am doing, which postulates that all sensible thoughts converge at a point to establish certain rules of nature that all people can gain from. The 4 tracks are: track 1 would talk about genesis of Rahu, track 2 would talk about genesis of Saraswati, the ruling deity of Rahu, track 3, as I said, would talk about science and talk about concept of singularity in particular. Track 4 would talk about some concepts related to string theory in quantum physics. Now let's begin the track 1 with the story of Rahu as per the Vedic traditions. This is how the story goes. Durvasa Muni once cursed Lord Indra, the leader of the demigods or Devas, and all the Devas to be bereft of all strength, energy, and fortune. In battles that followed this incident, Devas were defeated and Asuras, or the demons, led by King Bali, gained control of the universe. Devas sought help from Lord Vishnu, who advised them to treat Asuras in a diplomatic manner. Devas formed an alliance with the Asuras to jointly churn the ocean for the nectar of immortality and to share it among them. However, Lord Vishnu told Devas that he would arrange that they alone obtain the nectar. Rahu, one of the Asuras, eventually got hold of the nectar and started celebrating. Frightened, Devas appealed to Vishnu, who then took the form of Mohini. As a beautiful enchantress, Mohini distracted the Asuras, took the Amrita, and distributed it amongst the Devas, who drank it. Rahu disguised himself as a Deva and drank some of the nectar. Due to their luminous nature, the sun god Surya and the moon god Chandra noticed the switching of the sides. They informed Mohini, but before the nectar could pass his throat, Mohini cut off his head with a divine discuss, the Sudarshan Chakra. But as the nectar had gone down his throat, he did not die. From that day, his head was called Rahu and body was called Ketu. Later, Rahu and Ketu became planets. Now that we have understood the story of genesis of Rahu, let's understand the story of genesis of his ruling deity, Saraswati. The lord of Rahu is Saraswati. She is portrayed as sitting on a white swan holding a string instrument called Veena. For this episode to make sense, it would be important for the viewers to understand the Hindu theory of creation as per Brahmanada Purana and the Saraswati's role as the creator along with Brahma. Brahma, after rising from the sea of eternity, first created 4 boys the Sanat Kumaras, and out of his thoughts and asked them to produce children. They did not know how. They did not understand why. They disappeared. Then came 10 grown men, again out of the Brahma's thoughts. These men were Prajapatis. They knew how to produce children. They asked their father to give them a wife. Brahma split himself into two. From his left half came a creature unlike Brahma or his sons. It was a woman. She was extraordinarily beautiful. Brahma and Prajapatis were stirred by her beauty. The woman walked around Brahma to pay her respects, for Brahma was her father. Brahma, overwhelmed by desire, sprouted 3 extra heads, 2 on the sides and 1 behind, so that he could look upon her at all times. Discomforted by her father's stare, the daughter rose to the sky. Brahma popped a 5th head atop of the other 4. This one looked away from Narayan towards the daughter. The daughter ran, Brahma ran after her. As she ran, the daughter took a number of forms, all female: goose, mare, cow, doe. Afraid of losing her, determined to possess her, Brahma kept on taking the complementary male forms: gander, horse, bull, buck. Thus, different type of jiva came into existence. This is as per Brahmanada Purana. Now that we have understood the story of genesis of Rahu and its ruling deity Saraswati, let's move on to the final 2 tracks which are related to science. In the 3rd track, I will talk to you about the concept of singularity. The truth is that we are fast approaching an event unprecedented in history, a tipping point of sorts known as the technological singularity. When this happens, the world as we know it will not be the same again. It will also mark the beginning of a new chapter in human history. In physics, singularity is a point when the gravity is so intense that even space and time begin to break down, like the Big Bang or the black hole. But it also refers to a time in the future when the computer power grows without limits, surpassing human intelligence, sweeping aside everything in its path. This event may be sometime in the near future or way ahead in the future. Nonetheless, most experts agree that technological singularity is inevitable. In the 4th track, I will be talking to you about quantum physics and string theory in particular. The scientists across the world have been obsessed with finding a unified theory, or a master equation, if you will, an equation that describes all the forces of nature like electromagnetic waves, gravity, etc. However, this master equation has eluded the scientist community for long. In fact, this was also one of the unfinished work of the great Albert Einstein. More recently, string theorists have come very close to establishing this fine equation. However, for this equation to work, it presupposes the existence of more than the 3 seen dimensions that our world is made of. That is up and down, right and left, back and forth. It suggests that there should at least be 10 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. Now let me talk a little more about the string theory before I lead you to the point that I am trying to make through this track. At the root of the string theory is search for the scientists to find out the answer to what is the most basic, most fundamental, indivisible, uncuttable, all-pervasive constituents of making up everything in the world around us. If we look at any familiar object around us, say for instance this pen, and try to find out what it is made of, let's imagine that we go deeper to find out what are its constituents. We all know that objects are made of atoms. If we go further down, each atom comprises of electrons going around a nucleus formed of protons and neutrons. We also know that neutrons and protons are formed of even tinier particles called the quarks. This is where the conventional ideas stop, and here is the new idea of string theory. Deep inside these particles is something else, and this something else is the tiny dancing filament of energy or vibrating strings. And the pattern of frequency in which they vibrate, like the different notes of music, lead to the creation of different types of particles that the world around us is made of. So according to string theory, if we look at the ultra microscopic landscape of the universe, we will just see this huge number of tiny vibrating filaments of energy. The pattern in which they vibrate leads to creation of various forces of nature as well. For instance, one pattern of vibration will create matter particles like neutrons and protons. Another pattern of vibration will create radiation particles like photons and gravitons, and so on and so forth. This is where you see the unification of various forces of nature or the unified theory. However, the catch is when you study the mathematics of string theory, it does not work in the conventional existence of three dimensions. It necessitates the existence of at least 10 dimensions of space and one dimension of time. The manner in which these strings vibrate is influenced by the geometry of these minute, curled up multiple dimensions, which are intertwined in a calliope shape and exert a lot of impact on our existence. How this geometry of multiple dimensions impact the different frequencies of vibration of these strings can be understood from the parallel of how the shape of various musical instruments tend to produce different notes of music. Scientists believe the understanding the geometry of these dimensions will actually hold the key to the reason as to how the world has been created. At this point, I would just want you to hold on to whatever I have said in this section, as I will refer to this section during my concluding track for establishing certain rules of nature, track 5. In the final track, I will draw from the 4 stories that I have told you to establish certain lessons that we can all gain from. If Rahu is science and technology in the divine scheme of things, its limbs have been cut off so that it does not become so powerful that it causes people harm. The same thought is again resonated in Vedic astrology, wherein Rahu is always placed 7th house from Ketu, which is the largest distance for the mutual placement of 2 planets in a chart. I believe there is a lesson for a more thought through and responsible use of science and technology contained in these stories. The story of Saraswati points out to another lesson for the scientific community to not become obsessed with a particular technology, as science and technology is ever changing. The obsession with technology will not only lead to disgrace, which can be observed in the incestuous behavior of Brahma. This is the reason why, despite being the creator, he is never worshipped by the Hindus, and there are no temples dedicated to Brahma across the world, but for the exception of the one at Pushkar, Rajasthan. The story of Saraswati also has a parallel in Vedic astrology. The fact is that Rahu actually exalts or becomes most powerful in Gemini, which is the house of Mercury. In other words, technology will benefit the business person more than the creator. As you can see, Brahma is not worshipped despite being the creator. The other derivative of this is that technology is best used as a support function for accelerating business. And best technologies need business minds for it to be accepted and appreciated. Rahu also behaves like the planet it is sitting in a house with, and the planets that aspects it. In other words, technology can be good for or bad depending upon who actually is using it. We learned earlier that technology is best utilized by business people, but we all know business people are not always ethical and are driven by profit motive and not social welfare. In my view, the world in the future will be dominated by business people owning strong technologies. We can already see the trends with the kind of power technology oriented businesses like Google and Facebook are drawing. If principles of Vedic astrologies have to be believed, a powerful Rahu will always try to gain power away from the royal planets, Sun and Moon, that are his sworn enemies. My view is that unless states or socially conscious people become more powerful in controlling the owners of technology, there will be a time in not too a distant future where businesses owning strong technology will actually assume power and change the rules of the game as we know it. I don't know it could have positive impact, like there could be no boundaries in the world or no nations, or a negative impact where people could be slaves of the owners of technology or technology itself. See, Rahu gives up most of its negative quality if it is aspected by Guru. Guru is also spirituality. I feel the scientific world should be even more spiritually conscious if they have to create ethical technology, which the humanity as such can gain from. I strongly feel spiritual consciousness should be a part of the basic training of all budding scientists, as this consciousness will help young scientists in opening their minds to possibilities which might not present hard evidence, but a type of evidence which is more subtle and counterintuitive, which well may lead to the unlocking of the mysteries of nature. On the same note, let me draw your attention once again to Saraswati. If you look at the classical depiction of Saraswati, she is shown as playing a string instrument called Veena. So Saraswati has created the universe through vibration of music, which ties in very well with the string theory. Believes that the most fundamental constituent of the universe is vibrating filaments of energy, shaped like strings. More interestingly, the contention of the string theorists that there are more than three dimensions ties in very well with the Vedic beliefs. According to certain Hindu schools, all the demigods and gods that we know of exist up to three dimensions or loks, with Krishna Bhagwan or Savla being the lord of the three dimensions. This resonates well with the three dimensions in our universe. The same school believes that God exists much beyond three dimensions in the 10th dimension. This bears uncanny similarity to the belief held by the string theorists that for a unified theory to mathematically work, it necessitates existence of at least 10 dimensions. The story of dimension, as per Hindu beliefs, has also been beautifully described in the book God Speaks by Meher Baba. You might want to read it to understand better what I'm talking about. If you recollect, in the earlier sections, I spoke about how the shape of these dimensions influences the frequency of vibrations of these strings at the quantum level, which is responsible for the diverse variety of particles in the universe. Very interestingly, this knowledge was available to the ancient rishis or saints who had mastered different mantras with their various sound vibrations for curing ailments, influencing the weather, or even influencing events. This obsession of the scientific world to obtain a better understanding of the various dimensions is not unique to them. In fact, an average sadhak or a practitioner of meditation in India also understands the significance of understanding the various dimensions. There are mantras known to these sadhaks whose incantation leads to the opening of the doors to these multiple dimensions. Knowledge of these dimensions lead to siddhis or huge endless power, which can provide the incumbent abilities to perform miracles. I believe this knowledge could be the source of miracles like curing people, walking on water, or many other performed by saints like Jesus Christ. I feel these sadhanas or focused dimension related meditation reveals the science behind these dimensions, which allows the sadhak to modify strings at the quantum level to perform feats that seem like miracles to ordinary folks, which in essence is a clearer understanding of scientific laws. I firmly feel spirituality is a science waiting to be discovered. I know huge amount of money is being spent by scientific community and countries in scientific experiments like the one being performed through the Hadron Collider in CERN, Geneva. My request and advice to the scientific community across the world is to also allocate a fraction of these dollars for conducting experiments for finding more subtle evidence of these dimensions by interacting with these spiritual scientists or sadhaks. With this approach, I feel the progress will be much faster for the scientific community in finding answers it is seeking. I leave you with an interesting astrological fact about Rahu. It is always retrograde in an astrological chart, or it seems like moving backwards. Drawing a parallel from this, my advice to the scientific world is that if they want to succeed in their scientific pursuit, they should think out of the box and maybe opposite of conventional wisdom. Like Rahu, who is so powerful as it is always retrograde. Maybe science embracing spirituality would be the right step in that direction.